in the stories we tell. After 10 years in Qingzhou, I truly believed that Julian Gu and I shared a bond that no one could ever sever. Yet, on the first day of spring, with a single sentence, he ruthlessly cut everything away. "Serafina," he said, his voice void of the warmth I had known. "My feelings for you are merely those of a brother for a sister. There is absolutely no romantic love between us." Then, without a backward glance, he turned his back on me to propose to my younger sister, seeking to trade our shared history for his future career. Meanwhile, my father, Arthur Sheng, intended to marry me off to a widower solely to consolidate his own power. One man wanted to climb higher, the other wanted to bind his alliances tight, and I was pushed into the middle, treated like a mere commodity to be bargained away at any moment. But they forgot one thing: having lived 10 years in abandonment, the thing I learned best wasn't how to be obedient, but how to save myself. On the day of the Royal Autumn Hunt, I stepped out into the middle of the hunting grounds dressed in black martial attire, drawing my bow and notching an arrow. While all of the capital's elite were waiting to see me fail, I raised my head and looked directly up at the high platform, uttering a single sentence that changed the entire board. "Your Majesty, this humble daughter wishes to enter the palace." Hearing this, one would know I wasn't asking for a path, I was carving my own. It began on the 8th day of January, when the Gu family arrived at the gates of the Sheng estate to propose marriage. Ironically, the one they sought to wed was not me, the girl who had grown up as Julian's childhood sweetheart in Qingzhou, but my younger sister, the second Miss, Vivian Sheng. Gathering all my courage, I secretly evaded the servant's eyes and chased him outside the manor, blocking his path at the stone steps to demand the truth. Julian frowned as he looked at me. His lips still held that gentle smile of the past, but the words that escaped them were as cold as falling frost. "Sarah, I only have brotherly affection for you. There is absolutely no romantic love." I listened, unable to comprehend the sudden shift. I asked him back, my voice struggling to remain steady against the rising tide of betrayal. "You and my sister have never even met before today. Where did this romantic love come from?" He hesitated for a moment, then spoke slowly, each word deliberate as if calculated long ago. "Vivian's reputation for talent is renowned throughout the city. Her grace and intelligence make her the best choice for the position of the Gu family's primary wife." At that moment, I finally understood he didn't choose the person he loved, he chose the person who was suitable. That single, light sentence was enough to turn a marriage into a balance sheet. His certain tone made me realize the harsh reality. I looked up at him, my gaze deep and unfathomable. Not proud, yet not humiliated. The image of that desolate girl from Qingzhou vanished completely. I asked him directly, "Let us not beat around the bush. So, you never once thought of marrying me? You only wanted to use me as a ladder to climb into the Sheng family, didn't you?" Before I could hear his answer, I heard the sound of hurried footsteps behind me. The head matron of the manor led several people as they caught up to us. She shot me a sideways glance, then turned to bark at the servants beside her. "Why haven't you taken the eldest miss back to the manor yet?" Having said that, she turned back to me, her eyelids lowered in a gesture of feigned respect, but her spine remained ramrod straight, refusing to soften even by half an inch. "Eldest miss," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Young Master Gu is currently negotiating a marriage with the second miss. Even if you and young Master Gu had some acquaintance back in Qingzhou, rushing out like this is, after all, against the rules. Our Sheng family has always valued the rules above all else." She emphasized the word, rules, as if trying to force me to bow my head and swallow my pride. I narrowed my eyes at her, thinking to myself that she truly lived up to her reputation as Lady Eleanor Shen's confidante. Skilled at twisting words and exerting pressure. "How truly generous with your words," I remarked dryly. Julian's face, standing nearby, immediately darkened. He usually treated others with mildness, yet at this moment, he exuded an aura of authority without even being angry. His voice was so cold it made one's skin crawl. "Metron, watch your tongue." The woman froze. She realized instantly that the man before her was no longer a nameless scholar from a distant countryside. He was the newly crowned top scholar, personally appointed by the emperor. His future as a close official in the Hanlin Academy was immeasurable. Not to mention he was currently arranging a marriage with the second miss. If she offended him and caused a mistake, Lady Shen's temper would be enough to skin her alive. Her face turned pale, cold sweat dripping down. I watched, finding it almost laughable. This was the rule of the Sheng family, cowering before power, yet acting superior and lecturing their own family. Later, in the main hall, my father, Minister Arthur Sheng, was in a towering rage. He violently threw a tea lid toward me. I tilted my head, barely managing to avoid the porcelain shards that shattered everywhere. The first wife, Eleanor Shen, hurried forward to stroke his chest, her face etched with worry. My lord, please calm your anger. Sarah has only recently returned. It is only natural that she isn't yet familiar with the rules of the capital. If there is blame, it lies with me, for failing in my duty as a mother to teach her properly. As she spoke, she pulled out a handkerchief and dabbed at the corners of her eyes. A soft movement, yet not a single tear fell. I laughed coldly in my heart. The eldest daughter commits a fault, yet the stepmother takes the blame. Such logic was something I had truly never heard before. Vivian sat primly in a lower seat, her beautiful face clouding with displeasure. It must be admitted those three standing together truly looked like a family. As for me, since the day my birth mother passed away 10 years ago, I have been nothing more than someone who happens to carry the Sheng name in this manner, present, yet non-existent. At the age of 6, because I was said to have a spiritual conflict with the new wife, Eleanor, my father flew into a rage and ordered me sent away to our ancestral home in Qingzhou. He left me in the care of my grandmother and never checked on me for 10 years. Now, he has suddenly hurried to bring me back to the capital. If anyone told me there was no scheme involved, I would never believe it. Because a child abandoned for 10 years is usually called back not out of love, but because they have become useful. I straightened my back and raised my face, looking at the man sitting high above without a hint of fear. Father, what is my crime? This man was clearly my father, yet in his eyes, I saw not even a fraction of paternal affection. You rebellious wretch. He slammed the table and shouted. You knew very well that the Gu family came to propose marriage to Vivian. Yet, you ignored all maidenly shame and chased Julian outside, pulling and dragging at him. How do you think the outsiders will look at our Sheng family? How will they look at your younger sister? He brushed Lady Shen's hand aside, stepped down the dais, and delivered a sharp, powerful slap across my face. I fell to the ground, my ears ringing. A warm trickle immediately seeped from the corner of my mouth, and the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. I looked up at that cold, heartless face, and felt something inside me plummet into the abyss. From this moment on, I would no longer harbor any expectations. I clenched my teeth, my voice hoarse yet maintaining the proper etiquette. Does father not know that Julian and I were engaged long ago in Qingzhou? Now that things have come to this, if I do not ask for clarity, will I not become a laughingstock for the whole world in the days to come? As soon as I finished, Vivian leaped from her chair. She swung her sleeve, accidentally knocking over a plate of likes that a maid had just brought in. The plump, red fruits, reportedly a tribute brought into the capital by galloping horses just this morning, were rare items that even money might not buy. Sadly, not a single one had ever been seen in my courtyard. Vivian shouted aggressively. What nonsense are you talking about? How could Julian ever be engaged to you? You must be delusional, spewing such wild lies here. Lady Eleanor also stepped closer. A flash of loathing crossed her eyes, but it was quickly masked by a layer of motherly kindness. Her voice was as soft as cotton, but her words were as solid as stone. Sarah, do you perhaps harbor resentment toward me in your heart? You are older than Vivian, so by right, your marriage should have been settled first. But for the Gu family to come for Vivian, it was truly something I never expected. She paused for effect before continuing. If you have grievances, speak them to me. Do not carelessly let rumors tarnish your own reputation. On the surface, she spoke carefully, appearing to care for me. But I understood her better than anyone. She wished I had died in Qingzhou and never returned. My existence reminded her that she was only the second wife who came later, and it frustrated her because I held the status of the eldest daughter, a position she wanted for Vivian but could not take. 10 years ago, when I was only 6, she couldn't tolerate me. With just a small trick, she convinced my father to send me away. Now that her influence is established, her position in the Sheng family is as solid as a rock. In her mind, crushing me is as simple as stepping on an ant. I casually wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth and took a jade pendant, not of particularly high quality, from the sachet at my waist, holding it out toward the man in front of me. Father, this is the token given by the Gu family. Before Arthur could take it, Vivian rushed forward, snatched the pendant from my hand, and hurled it violently onto the ground. The sound of shattering jade rang out, cutting through the last bit of patience in my heart. She didn't even look at me. She just clung to Arthur's arm, her voice spoiled and arrogant. Tokens or no tokens, I don't care. I want to marry Julian. Father, I don't like my sister. Tell her to go back to Qingzhou. Nonsense. Arthur shouted. He barked a light reprimand, but his eyes were filled with a doting warmth that was blinding. Completely different from the icy frost he had just shown me. It turned out he wasn't incapable of fatherly love. That love just never fell on me. He turned his face back, looking at me with impatience. His voice was cold, like a verdict in a court. Get back to your courtyard. Whether this matter is true or false, do not mention it again. As for your marriage, this minister has his own arrangements. Stay in your courtyard, wait faithfully, and focus on learning the rules. If there is a next time, this minister will not show mercy. He referred to himself as this minister, not father. A simple change in address was enough to tell me exactly where I stood in his heart. In his eyes, it seemed he had long ago ceased to view me as his daughter. I looked at the shattered jade on the floor, my hands hanging by my sides instinctively tightening. Since things had reached this point, I had nothing left to fear. I knew that Minister Wang of the Ministry of Revenue was nearly 40. His wife had passed away 6 months ago, and he was currently looking for a new wife to manage his household. Countless people wanted to climb higher by offering themselves to him, but Minister Wang had a strange temperament. He didn't like low-ranking families, he didn't like average looks, and he didn't like older women. I realized this was the marriage that Arthur Sheng was plotting for me. It was the reason he brought me back from Qingzhou. Using a cheap daughter to tighten his ties with the Ministry of Revenue was a profitable trade. No one cared if I was willing. They didn't even bother to inform me. I could no longer count on Julian. Now I only had myself to save. If no one asked what I wanted, I would ask myself first and find my own way to survive. In September, the marriage between Vivian and Julian was finalized. To avoid further trouble, whenever the Gu family visited, Eleanor would send people to find any excuse to keep me confined in my courtyard, forbidding me from taking a single step out. I seemed to have learned how to be obedient, causing no trouble and giving no one a reason to criticize. Every time the Gu family left, Vivian would intentionally come to my small courtyard like a proud peacock, flaunting every gift Julian had given her. She was afraid I wouldn't see. She was afraid I wouldn't hurt. She tilted her chin, her voice sweet yet poisonous. So what if you and Julian knew each other for 10 years? His heart and soul are entirely mine now. You'd better behave and stop dreaming of things that don't belong to you. Whether it's father's love or Julian's devotion, they belong only to me. I nodded, my expression calm. Then I wish you always get what you desire. Vivian looked at me with suspicion, seemingly dissatisfied with that reaction. She let out a cold snort. You'd better mean it. With that, she flicked her sleeve and left arrogantly, leaving behind the suffocating scent of cheap vanity. In late September, the annual Royal Autumn Hunt began. I knew my opportunity had arrived. Eleanor originally didn't want to bring me along, fearing I would show my face and cause a scene. But because Minister Wang would also be attending this hunt, my father immediately took charge, forcing me to dress up and join the procession. On the day of departure, Julian was already waiting in front of the manor. He was dressed in black robes, standing by the carriage, tall, refined, and elegant. A single glance was enough to make one feel like they were meeting an autumn breeze on a lake. Vivian hiked up her skirt and ran joyfully toward him, her face beaming and her eyes shining like stars. Brother Julian, did you come to pick me up? Julian, fearing she might trip, reached out to steady her. He bowed his head and smiled gently, mild as jade. Standing next to Vivian, they truly looked like a perfect pair that would make any outsider praise them. After the greetings, his gaze seemed to drift casually over me before quickly moving away. So fast it was as if it had never stopped at all. I stood beside my father, perfectly composed, without a ripple of emotion on my face. Since my mother died, I have understood one thing: never place your hope in others. A man's heart changes easily. Since Julian no longer needs me, then I no longer need him. The past in Qingzhou can be considered a dream that has vanished. Once you wake up, it's over. The hunting grounds were located in the western suburbs. By the time we arrived, many noble families had already gathered. My father, as the prime minister, stood at the head of the officials, his power as bright as the midday sun. Thus, as soon as we stepped off the carriage, noble ladies surrounded us, their greetings coming like a flood. Seeing my unfamiliar face, someone curiously inquired. Lady Shen introduced me dismissively. Just the eldest daughter of the house. then immediately moved on, as if mentioning more would soil her mouth. The people at the hunting grounds were all shrewd, they knew which way the wind blew. Facing me, the enthusiasm on their faces faded visibly, while the noble young misses crowded around Vivian. Their flattery and praise were endless, making her so happy her smile seemed to glow. I was the only one who seemed out of place. My father didn't stand by me, and Eleanor didn't even bother to put on a show of kindness. They ignored everyone and left me cold and alone. She wanted to tell me that even if I were the eldest daughter of the Sheng family, I shouldn't hope to cause any waves in the capital. But the more I was pushed into a corner where no one looked, the clearer I knew what I had to do. I wanted to force them to look at me. How interesting. Since it's like this, I must let her know how I, Seraphina Sheng, will stir the winds and clouds of this capital. According to tradition, the autumn hunt always offered rewards, and the greatest reward came from the emperor himself. The winner could make one wish. As long as it didn't violate morality or law, the emperor would grant it. On the first day, the Minister of Rights stood on the high platform to call the names of the participants. Most were young noblemen and sons of the capital's elite. There were also those like Julian, who had just appeared in the imperial examinations and wanted to use this chance to show their talent and climb the social ladder. But without exception, they were all men. They all stood with their heads high and chests out, their eyes burning with the desire to prove themselves. However, when the name, Seraphina, was finally called, the entire hunting ground fell silent for a heartbeat. People looked at each other, their faces filled with confusion. I saw my father, sitting below the young emperor, his face suddenly darkening. Among the crowd, even the usually composed Eleanor looked momentarily panicked, her eyes darting around as if to confirm what she just heard. My arrogant and naive sister gaped, her eyes wide as if she had just heard something impossible. I even saw Julian. He was looking straight at me, his gaze dark and unreadable, flickering with a flash of panic he couldn't hide. The emperor tilted his head slightly and asked my father in a calm voice, "Who is Seraphina?" The entire court knew the Sheng family only had one branch, and the oldest male of this generation was only 7 years old. Before my father could answer, I stepped out from the unremarkable crowd and performed a grand salute. My voice was clear as I announced, "Your Majesty, I am Seraphina." Today, I wore black hunting gear, my hair tied up high and neat. I truly looked no different from a young man. My father immediately bolted upright, both angry and anxious. A shout almost burst from his lips, as if he had forgotten where he was. "You rebellious girl, what nonsense are you doing here? Get down at once." Having said that, he seemed to wake up, realizing the emperor was sitting above him. His face became even more unsightly as he stood there awkwardly, trapped between advancing and retreating. The emperor, however, seemed not to care about that loss of composure. He simply spoke indifferently. "I remember now. Seraphina, the eldest daughter of the Sheng family." His Majesty raised his head, his gaze falling directly on me. Calm yet sharp, as if measuring every inch of me. I also looked up at the man sitting on high. This young emperor, Dominic Xiao, had a face like carved jade and eyes like cold stars. Even a slight frown exuded an innate nobility. His natural authority made it hard for people to breathe. The moment His Majesty saw my face clearly, his body shuddered slightly. A strange light flashed in his eyes, but it returned to normal in an instant. He asked calmly, "Tell me, what is this about?" I answered immediately, my tone intentionally casual. "Your Majesty, the rules of the autumn hunt do not forbid women from participating. I am untalented, but having lived in Qingzhou for 10 years, I have learned a bit of horsemanship and archery. Now that I have returned to the capital, I wish to take a gamble, perhaps to seek a bit of luck." Several scoffs immediately echoed around us, mostly people mocking me for not knowing my limits. The emperor narrowed his eyes, his lips curving into a slight, pondering smile. My heart suddenly tightened. I understood perfectly I was betting both my life and my future on his answer. If he said yes, I would have a path to live. If he said no, I would be crushed right here. Whether this risky move would land or not depended entirely on a single thought from His Majesty. Just as I was feeling anxious, the emperor's lips quirked, and his voice boomed across the hunting grounds. "Granted." Then, as if he had just noticed my father still cowering to the side, he teased leisurely, "The Prime Minister has truly raised a fine daughter." That single word, "granted," was a lifeline for me, but for the Sheng family, it was a slap to the face. From this moment on, silencing me would no longer be easy. I guessed that at this very moment my father wished he could strangle me on the spot. Unfortunately, the decree had been given, the order granted, and I had effectively cut off all his retreats. From now on, I feared he would have little opportunity to discipline me as he pleased. I donned my bow and arrows and spurred my horse into the dense forest. As I passed the crowd, I glanced back briefly, not missing the venomous look in Eleanor Shen's eyes. She was likely calculating in her head how she would skin me alive once the hunt ended. I curled my lips, throwing a mocking smile her way. Let us wait and see. The wind whistling past my ears was a freedom I hadn't touched in a long time. I leaned low over the horse's back, as graceful as a bird returning to its nest. My mind was exceptionally clear. Today's top spot, I must win it. I drew my bow and notched an arrow. Every shot that left the string was precise, never missing its mark. The people who were originally waiting to see a joke gradually fell silent. I rode deeper into the forest, yet someone was following me relentlessly. Reaching a secluded spot, I reined in my horse and turned it around, coldly eyeing the person who had just caught up. Young Master Gu, following me so miserably. It doesn't seem to match the brotherly affection you once spoke of. Julian's face stiffened, yet he acted as if he didn't hear the mockery. A hint of worry appeared in his eyes, and his voice was urgent as he urged his horse closer to mine. Sarah, what are you trying to do? The capital's power is a tangled web. One wrong step and you will fall into eternal ruin. Even if your father is the prime minister, once trouble starts, even he might not be able to protect you. Why can't you just stay peacefully in the inner courtyard? I looked at him, not knowing whether to laugh at his naivety or his stupidity. The inner courtyard of a powerful family was never a place of peace, it was a battlefield draped in silk. I shot back a question, my tone sharp. Do you even know why the minister brought me to the capital? He frowned, clearly confused. What do you mean by that? I looked him straight in the eye, ensuring every word hit like a nail being driven into a coffin. Has Vivian not told you yet? The Sheng family intends to give me to Minister Wang as his second wife. Is this the peace you speak of? He froze on the spot, his body trembling slightly, his eyes filled with a mix of horror and disbelief. Seeing that I wasn't joking, his hands gripped the reins so hard that the veins on his arms bulged against the leather. How could he dare? He whispered, the shock evident in his voice. I burst into a mocking laugh, cold to the bone. And what about you? How did you dare, Julian? 10 years ago, Arthur Sheng abandoned me. Today, you have made the exact same choice. In my heart, you and he are no different. My words were like a blade stabbing into the place he tried to hide. His expression shattered, and a look of pain he couldn't suppress flooded his eyes. He gave a bitter smile, his voice going hoarse. Sarah, I never intended to hurt you, not even by a hair's breadth. It's just, there are some things I truly had no other choice but to do. The name, Sarah. The name he once gave me in our shared past. Hit me like a strange wind, momentarily threatening to blow down the wall of coldness I had painstakingly built. I looked at him silently, waiting for him to continue. Waiting for him to lay his heart bare before me and explain why he had forsaken me. But facing my questioning gaze, he only parted his lips and then turned his head away, remaining cruelly silent. I sighed inwardly. I gave us a chance, but he didn't trust me enough to take it. To say I wasn't sad would be a lie. At this moment, my heart felt as if thousands of ants were gnawing at it. On the surface, I was as calm as a still lake, but inside, my soul was being torn apart. I remembered the year I first arrived in Qingzhou. My grandmother didn't love me. She casually assigned a maid to watch me, and then threw me to the back of her mind. She didn't even notice when that maid lost me for months. It was Julian, who was only 8 years old at the time, who found me, pathetic and lost, and brought me to his home. Back then, I was drowning in the grief of losing my mother, as dull and unresponsive as a block of wood. The moment he showed kindness, I clung to him like a drowning person to a piece of driftwood, always clutching his hem and hiding behind his back. Back then, he was the young master of the Qingzhou prefect. Pure and kind-hearted, he named me Sarah and patiently let me be his little shadow, leading me everywhere to play. It wasn't until months later that the Sheng family's servants finally found me. He even played the part of a protector, sternly warning that if anyone dared to bully me in the future, he would surely seek revenge tenfold. In Qingzhou, the great families all respected the Gu family. Thanks to his intentional care, my days in Qingzhou weren't too difficult. If the tragedy of the Gu family hadn't happened later, perhaps today we would still be in Qingzhou, riding horses and singing songs in freedom. I pulled back my thoughts, returning to the harsh reality of the hunting grounds. The man before me still refused to explain further, and my heart turned as hard as stone. I said slowly, each word cold as ice. From now on, we each go our own way. As for what I want to do, you can no longer stop me, can you? I looked directly into his eyes, emphasizing the finality of our bond with a single title that cut like a knifey brother-in-law. He winced at my coldness, his eyes turning red. In my heart, a vague sense of vengeful pleasure rose, a joy that was both salty and bitter. I knew I was being cruel, but I also knew that if I softened now, I would be the one pushed to her death. I didn't hesitate anymore, turning my horse to seek new prey. Sarah. The wind was loud, and I seemed to hear someone calling behind me, but it didn't matter anymore. The hunt ended. My horse was draped with prey, and behind it was tied a full-grown stag. It was so beautiful, for a moment, I hadn't the heart to kill it. My hair was disheveled by the wind, and my clothes were stained with blood, yet my heart felt strangely joyful. I knew I had won. I looked up toward the high platform, raising the prey in my hand and directing my gaze toward the man sitting there. At this moment, I was perhaps a bit too reckless. The dark emotions suppressed for so long finally found an outlet. I simply allowed myself to enjoy this rare moment of release. Excellent. Well done. My father's angry scolding and the Emperor's praise rang out almost simultaneously. His Majesty was even somewhat excited, standing up and clapping his hands repeatedly. My father's face turned from green to white, his brewing rage forced back down his throat. Emperor Dominic Xiao glanced at my father, then looked at me, his voice resonant and clear. Tell me, what reward do you desire? We looked at each other from a distance. A smile played in the Emperor's eyes, which were filled with a strange light, completely ignoring my lack of etiquette. I intentionally acted as if I were deep in thought. From the corner of my eye, I saw Julian standing to the side, his body stiff, his brow furrowed in deep worry. What was he so afraid of? Before I could speak, Vivian stepped forward, instantly grabbing my arm and smiling sweetly. Sister is so good to me. Knowing that Julian and I have a wedding date at the end of the year, she surely wants to ask for an imperial blessing to grant us a harmonious marriage. Thank you, sister. Her voice was full of innocent joy, sounding so sincere that I couldn't help but laugh out loud. How thick-skinned. Eleanor Shen, seeing this, also put on a radiant smile and took my other arm, saying gently, seeing you two sisters so close brings me great comfort. Sarah, you are truly thoughtful. They worked together like a well-rehearsed act, trying to decide for me. The crowd also began to praise our sisterly bond, certain that I would have to go along with it. But they still didn't understand me. I used my strength to shove both their hands away. Their faces immediately stiffened, and their smiles became strained. They tried to secretly pull me back, but unfortunately, my physical strength was the one talent of mine worth mentioning. After brushing them off, I looked up at the high platform with a determined gaze and spoke clearly, one word at a time. Your Majesty, this humble daughter wishes to enter the palace. The silence was deafening. I continued, I do not seek a reward for anyone else. I only seek a path from which no one can ever carelessly toss me back into the mud. As soon as I finished, the Emperor was momentarily stunned, then let out a hearty, unrestrained laugh. Granted, he declared. The eldest daughter of the Sheng family, Seraphina, is bestowed the title of noble consort. She shall enter the palace in 3 days. My heart skipped a beat. With the position of queen still vacant, noble consort was the highest rank. Why did His Majesty decide so abruptly? The one more shocked than I was, however, was my father. He had once thought of sending Vivian into the palace, but the Emperor had always been wary of him. A daughter of the Sheng family had never been under the Emperor's consideration, so my father had completely given up on that idea. Now, it was me, the cheap daughter, who had achieved the rank of noble consort without him lifting a finger. How could he not be ecstatic? Caught between great grief and great joy, his smile looked more like a cry. I suppressed the strange feeling in my heart, thanked him, and stepped aside. People's eyes began to avoid mine, not daring to look directly at me. Wherever I walked, everyone bowed low. So this was the power of authority. Eleanor and my good younger sister were clearly choking with rage, yet they didn't dare say a word. Seeing them grit their teeth in silence was quite a pleasant sight. Only Julian seemed unable to recover, staring at me in a daze. He probably thought I would ask for freedom, for protection, or even to cancel his marriage, but he never imagined I would enter the palace. After all, I had once truly and deeply loved him. Once the hunt ended, I returned to the manor with my father, waiting for my entry into the palace in 3 days. The decree was set. The Emperor even sent a female guard with high martial skills named Shan Yu to protect me, and granted me a royal carriage for the journey back to the city. Such imperial grace was immense. On the way back, the Prime Minister's palanquin followed quietly behind my carriage. When I left, I was just a girl of the Sheng family. When I returned, I was a member of the imperial palace. I truly wanted to know what he was feeling in his heart right now. I curled my lips into a smile. This good play has only just begun. I hope his heart can take it. I have never forgotten for a single day how my mother died. Upon returning to the manor, the maids and servants who used to trample on me were nowhere to be found. Even Eleanor intentionally avoided me. Only Vivian seemed to still be out of her mind. She brazenly burst into my bedchamber, acting as if she were inspecting her own territory, glancing around everywhere. Seeing the pairs of high-grade porcelain vases that my father had just sent over, she grew furious and swept them all onto the floor. The sound of porcelain shattering rang out, and only then did she feel a bit better. She tilted her chin, her eyes full of contempt. "You're just a country girl. What right do you have to use such fine things? Don't think that because you've climbed a high branch, you can sit on my head," she sneered. "In this house, you will never surpass me." Before she could finish, Xuan stepped forward. With 2 swift, clean movements, she delivered 2 sharp slaps to Vivian's face. "How bold! Who are you to speak such arrogant words before the noble consort?" The hand of a martial artist is different from a normal person's. Her strike was as hard as iron. In an instant, Vivian's fair face swelled up, and her eyes filled with tears. But she was spoiled and didn't know when to restrain herself. She raised her hand to hit back, only to have Xuan grab her throat in a vice-like grip, making it impossible for her to move. The more she struggled, the tighter Xuan squeezed. It wasn't until her face turned purple, her eyes bulged, and her breath became ragged that she finally tasted true fear. Her whole body trembled, and the look she gave me was no longer arrogant, but filled with panic and plea. I slowly walked up to her, my fingertip brushing over her swollen cheek. "There is a cause for every grievance, a debtor for every debt," I continued softly. "Actually, I had no great grudge against you. If you had known how to live quietly, perhaps you could have remained a happy young miss for a few more days. I had no great affection for this half-sister, but I didn't hate her enough to want her dead. Whether she was arrogant or desperate, that was her life. But from the moment she entered my room today, I understood in the Sheng family, wanting to live in peace is a luxury. I can only make them learn to fear me." I signaled to Xuan, who understood and released her. Vivian lost her support and slumped to the floor, coughing and gasping for air. Hearing the news, Eleanor rushed in. Seeing Vivian on the ground in such a pathetic state, she trembled with rage. "How dare you? She is your younger sister." I nodded slightly, my icy gaze fixed on her. "She is indeed my sister. But tell me, is she my younger sister, or the elder sister who was born exactly 1 month before me?" As soon as the words were out, Eleanor looked as if she had been struck by lightning, frozen in place. A thin smile curved my lips as I stared her down. "You didn't think the events of that year were so well hidden that no one would ever know, did you?" Seeing her face turn deathly pale, her eyes filled with the panic of seeing a ghost, I felt satisfied. I said no more. "Sometimes, I don't need to lift another finger, I just need to let her live with her fear. Day by day she will wonder, night by night she will doubt. The 15 years of peace she stole. It's time to pay them back slowly." I gave Xuan a list of my mother's dowry, and told her to arrange for people to check every single item. If a single item was missing, Eleanor was to pay for it in taels of silver immediately. Every missing piece was to be compensated, no excuses. My mother was the daughter of a wealthy merchant from the south. When my father met her, he was just a penniless scholar who had to borrow money even for his tuition. Perhaps because of her merchant background, my mother had an unconscious weakness for fair-faced scholars. Moreover, my father back then was talented and had a silver tongue, coaxing her with words as sweet as honey until she fell deep in love. My maternal grandfather, not wanting her to suffer, prepared an incredibly lavish dowry. That dowry, even today, would make people gasp. It was those very chests of wealth that paved the way for my father's promotions and his rise to power. According to the law, a dowry is the private property of the married woman. Upon her death, that property is inherited by her children. As luck would have it, my mother had only one child, me. So today, I will settle the accounts clearly. Whoever swallowed my things will have to spit them out, coin by coin. This isn't greed, this is the debt they owe my mother, and today they must return it to me. I sat poised in the main hall, my fingertip touching a cup of freshly brewed hot tea. On the table before me were the lychees sent by the emperor's people, along with several plates of palace snacks. I leisurely tasted one. Its sweet, crisp flavor was indeed a delicacy. My father sat in the lower seat with a darkened face. Seeing the servants scurrying in and out as if they were stripping the house bare, his face was green, but he didn't dare fly into a rage as he once did. My father, Arthur Sheng, suppressed his rage and spoke in a low, commanding voice. "What are you doing? There is no need for you to interfere with the dowry. Lady Eleanor Shen will naturally prepare a dignified portion for you." He continued, his voice shifting to a tone of feigned advice. "Once you enter the palace, our family's honor is your honor. The harem is filled with hidden thorns, your family is your only solid support. Do you understand?" I raised my eyelids and nonchalantly tipped the cup in my hand. The tea spilled, splashing across the table, and dripping onto the floor. I watched the veins on his forehead pulse as his hands gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles turned white. I let a cold bone, deep smile spread across my face. "Father, do you still remember my mother?" At the mention of my birth mother, his body went rigid and a flicker of unease crossed his face. After a long moment, he forced himself to speak. "Your birth mother has been gone for over 10 years. Eleanor has managed this household ever since. If you have any heart left, do not bring her up again." I stood up and looked down at him from my height. I pinned him with a freezing gaze, my words falling like sharp blades. "Prime Minister Sheng, did you know that 10 years ago, on that night, I was in my mother's room? I had hidden in her wardrobe, intending to startle her for fun, but I accidentally fell asleep. The memory was vivid, slashing through the years. In my drowsy state, I heard you and her arguing and struggling. The sounds were so violent they seemed to tear the room apart. When I finally crawled out of the wardrobe, you were already gone." My mother lay on the cold floor. Beside her was a shattered wine cup, and the wine was mixed with bright red blood, spreading into a long, horrific stain that made my heart wither just to see it. I took a step closer. I was so terrified I nearly screamed, but my mother used her final strength to cover my mouth. She pulled me close, trembling, and told me to leave the Sheng house, to run to the south, as far away as possible. In the main hall, Arthur suddenly bolted upright, his eyes bloodshot as he stared at me as if he wanted to swallow me alive. I did not flinch, nor did I retreat. I faced him with total indifference. Seeing the murderous intent flash in the depths of his eyes, I grew even calmer. At least I knew I hadn't misjudged his character. I had been afraid I might go soft on him, but I hadn't. For 10 years, I survived not because anyone pitied me, but because I remembered one truth: those who want to kill me will always want to kill me. Prime Minister Sheng hissed through his teeth. "Noble consort, the path in the palace is treacherous. Be careful." I curled my lips slightly and replied at a measured pace, "I thank the minister for his guidance. This consort will surely keep it in her heart." He snorted coldly and flicked his sleeve, walking away with a back as stiff as a stone. My mother's dowry was inventoried and gathered, nearly hollowing out half of the Sheng family's fortune. Arthur had spent his life obsessing over power, and Eleanor was never skilled in business. For years, this manor's extravagant lifestyle had relied on the hundreds of shops and the profits from the estates within my mother's dowry. I truly felt my mother's sacrifice wasn't worth it, and I pitied the man's hypocrisy. Arthur likely never truly loved my mother. The so-called passion of their early years was nothing more than a layer of paint he applied to deceive the world. By marrying my mother, he no longer had to worry about money and could focus entirely on climbing the social ladder. But once he reached the top, he felt that a merchant's daughter was beneath him. My mother's existence served only to remind him of his once penniless days. So he hated her, yet he craved the wealth she brought. Ultimately, he conspired with Eleanor to drive my mother to her death, step by step. As Xuan led the men to carry away the dowry, Eleanor's face turned ghastly. In her room, 8 or 9 out of every 10 items were rare treasures that my mother had brought with her years ago. Even the carved sandalwood bed she slept on was dismantled and cleared away, leaving not a single splinter behind. Vivian's room faced a similar fate. She was stripped of everything, as if her very skin were being flayed. Eleanor finally reached her breaking point. She gritted her teeth and snarled, "Noble consort, as the saying goes, one should leave a path for others." I simply glanced at Xuan. Without a word, Xuan stepped forward and delivered 2 ringing slaps to Eleanor's face. The sound was so sharp it echoed in the heart. "The noble consort's property. Why was it in your room?" If you dare speak another word, I will make you account for every coin you've spent from this dowry over the last decade. I will make you spit out every last bit. Swan's temperament, striking the moment a word was out of place, was incredibly refreshing. It was like a clean cut. Vivian rushed forward to support Eleanor, her eyes red and her voice filled with bitter resentment. Sister, you aren't even in the palace yet and you're already acting so tyrannical. You have no respect for your elders, no love for your siblings. I don't believe you aren't afraid that rumors will ruin the royal family's reputation. She seemed to have forgotten yesterday's lesson. But as I took one step toward her, she instinctively recoiled like a startled rabbit facing a wolf. I stopped right in front of them, my lips hooked in a cold line. Why do you think the Emperor let Xuan accompany me back to this manor? I tilted my head, my voice as light as a breeze but sharp as ice. He feared this consort would get her hands dirty. I do not need to shed blood myself, I only need to stand in my rightful place, and those who once trampled on me will find their way to hell. Eleanor's rage overwhelmed her, her eyes rolled back, and she fainted on the spot. Vivian held her, her wails growing louder as if she wanted the whole Sheng estate to hear, but in my eyes, it was just a belated, pathetic performance. On the day I left home, the palace had arranged a grand ceremonial procession to collect me. Palace maids presented my noble consort robes, layer upon layer, like flowing water. I sat before the bronze mirror, looking at the woman reflected there. A figure in magnificent silk, embroidered with brilliant but not gaudy flowers. My aura was as composed as morning frost on a jade branch. My black hair was piled high in a majestic style, adorned with bright pearls. For a fleeting moment I felt like I didn't recognize myself. The matron styling my hair clicked her tongue in admiration. The noble consort truly has the face of a celestial being. Such noble elegance is rarely seen. She spoke while carefully pinning the 9, dragon and 4, phoenix crown onto my head, her movements as cautious as if she were afraid of dropping a single spark of imperial favor. I frowned slightly at the weight. She immediately pressed my hand down, signaling me to be at ease, her voice low but firm. This was specifically arranged by the Emperor. I suddenly understood. From the moment I placed this crown on my head, I was no longer just Seraphina. I had become a chess piece that the entire court would have to watch. In front of the manor gates, Arthur and his followers had been waiting since dawn. As I walked out gracefully, his expression was complex and unreadable. As for Eleanor and Vivian, their eyes couldn't hide their jealousy. It sparkled like tiny needles in their gaze. War respectfully see off the noble consort. I merely gave a slight nod and stepped into the phoenix palanquin. A palace attendant raised the curtain for me. As I leaned in, my entire body went stiff. There was someone already inside. The man wore bright gold robes. He sat there quietly as if he had been waiting a long time, a smile on his lips and eyes that were both tender and profound. He reached his hand out to me. I hesitated for a heartbeat, then smiled, placed my hand in his, and sat down opposite him. This servant has caused your majesty to make a personal trip. How exhausting it must be. He shook his head. It is not exhausting. I remember 2 years ago, I told you my private name. When no one is around, you may call me Diedrich. His hand gently brushed over my fingers, appearing casual yet deeply attentive. Sarah, has anyone made things difficult for you? My mind suddenly drifted back 2 years. At that time, Dominic Xiao must have still been the crown prince, traveling to Qingzhou on business. It was when the late emperor was critically ill and had summoned him back urgently. Their party was ambushed at the Three Gorges Pass. The terrain was treacherous, easy to defend but hard to escape. They were surrounded until their strength was nearly gone. It was I who was passing by and helped them shoot a path to survival. I knew Three Gorges Pass very well. Ever since I learned archery and riding, I had spent my days roaming those hills. I knew every hidden trail like I knew my own breath. That day, after taking down the assassins, I led him and his 2 guards through dense, narrow paths, safely guiding them out of the pass before dark. At that time, I was still dressed in men's clothing, and he hadn't noticed. He told me his name was Diedrich, and told me that if I ever faced difficulty, I should come to the capital to find him. Before leaving, he asked my name. I thought for a moment and only left him with the name, Sarah. Before galloping away, I still had to go find Julian. Back in the carriage, he looked at me silently, his voice deep and clear. Sarah, on the day of the autumn hunt, when you stood in the middle of the grounds in your riding gear, so bright and heroic, with just one glance, I recognized you. Back then, things were so rushed I didn't have the chance to thank you properly. Now that you are in the palace, I am truly happy. I bowed my head and smiled softly. How could I not know? Saving him back then hadn't been a calculated move. But when he said his name was Xiao, the imperial surname, I knew immediately. I came to the capital intending to ask him for a promise, but by a twist of fate, I ended up in his harem. Looking into his expectant eyes, my heart stirred. I squeezed his hand and replied softly, "This servant is also very happy. Happy not because of his favor, but because I had entered the most dangerous place in the world, yet held a shortcut that others would spend their lives seeking. I was happy because everything seemed much easier than the plans I had drawn in my mind." Dominic was a good emperor. He was so busy that every day he seemed pulled away by court affairs, border defense, irrigation, official evaluations. He weighed every matter personally before making a decision. When I first arrived, the head eunuch told me that His Majesty rarely visited the harem. Often, he would finish reviewing petitions so late that he would simply sleep in the side chamber of the Golden Hall. But since I entered the palace, he came to accompany me for dinner every single night. Sometimes, he even had the petitions moved to my palace. At night, he would review petitions under the lamp while I flipped through travelogues. The scent of ink brought a strange peace to my heart. Occasionally, he would ask for my thoughts on domestic issues. If I knew the answer, I gave it. If it involved court politics, I simply shook my head and kept silent. In this palace, being honest isn't always smart. It can be a self-inflicted trap. I didn't enter the palace to be the smartest person, but the one who lives the longest. For the first few days, I was a bit reserved, but he didn't seem to mind. In front of me, he never referred to himself as the emperor. He just spoke like a normal husband living a quiet life with his wife. However, I knew that such calm waters couldn't last forever. One day he held a petition and turned it over for a long time before finally letting his gaze fall on me. "Sarah, you lived in Qingzhou for many years. Did you ever know a man named Julian?" The candle flame before the desk flickered. I gently trimmed the wick and looked up at him, my voice calm. "Diedrich, I don't want to hide anything from you. Julian and I have known each other for 10 years. His expression stiffened as if he had just realized something. He was silent for a long time, so long that I couldn't read the emotions in his eyes. I sighed softly, walked over to him, and began to grind the ink stick in slow, steady circles, as if untangling a knot. "Be at ease, he once did me a great kindness. Without him, Serafina would have long ago become a handful of dust in Qingzhou, and I never would have met you 2 years ago. My relationship with him is not what you think. Now he is my father's son-in-law." His face relaxed slightly. He set down his brush and wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me onto his lap. His face rested in the crook of my neck, his voice husky but firm. "Sarah, I trust you." His stubble grazed my skin, making me shiver. A strange sensation rose in my heart. He seemed to have truly developed feelings for me. Keeping one arm around me, he opened the petition and placed it before my eyes. It was a recommendation from Arthur Sheng to promote Julian to the position of Chief of the Court of Judicial Review. He asked what I thought. I knew he was testing my loyalty to the Sheng family. After all, Arthur and I were still father and daughter. But some bonds are actually nooses. Keeping them only serves to strangle yourself. Perhaps it was time. I gently pushed him away and stood up. My robes pooled on the cold floor as I knelt, my forehead nearly touching the ground. "Your Majesty, this servant also has a petition." Seeing my sudden formality, he reached out to help me up. I didn't move. I straightened my back and looked him in the eye, every word as clear as a bell. "Your Majesty, this servant formally accuses the Prime Minister, Arthur Sheng, for embezzlement, bribery, treating human lives like grass, framing innocent people, and the murder of officials in Qingzhou." His expression changed completely, his brows knitting together, his eyes churning with unreadable waves. He pondered for a long time before staring at me. "Do you have proof?" Arthur's crimes were too numerous to count. He had stepped over countless lives to reach the position of Prime Minister. He enjoyed the glory of a superior, never pitying the life or death of others. My mother was only his first stepping stone. But the parents and elder brother of Julian were innocent victims of his power games. He didn't even know their names. He only had to sit in the capital and move his lips for someone to go out and slaughter the entire Gu family. Some people kill without ever holding a blade. Their words alone are enough to destroy a home. That day, I had pestered Julian to go riding with me. When we returned, the Gu estate's courtyard was filled with 73 corpses. Except for him, no one survived. Even the 2 guard dogs had been beheaded. Julian was 12 then, and I was 10. He went mad with grief for a long time. Everyone said it was the bandits at Three Gorges Pass. He believed it. He practiced martial arts desperately and roamed the pass every day like someone clutching cold ashes looking for a spark of revenge. I was afraid something would happen to him. Every time he went, I followed. Every time he returned, I was there. I didn't dare let him be alone in the dark. Even now, I remember nights when he wouldn't say a word, just staring at a flickering lamp as if it were a grave. I would call him, but he wouldn't answer. I could only sit beside him until dawn. It wasn't until 2 years ago that he suddenly changed, abandoning martial arts for academics. From then on, he avoided me, refusing to see me. I thought he was afraid of involving me in his troubles, until I accidentally heard my grandmother talking to my uncle back in the old manor. "Brother, you worked so hard to clear the obstacles and get this position for Arthur. In the future, you must help him climb even higher." Yes. After Julian's father met with an accident, my uncle had taken over as the prefect of Qingzhou. I didn't understand it then, but now all the suspicions connected into a straight line. I had never felt such pain. I was born into the Sheng family. Sheng blood flowed in my veins. The most painful thing wasn't the truth, but the realization that my very name made me a criminal in his eyes. When Julian came to the capital for the exams, he didn't inform the Sheng manor, but I knew he was coming for revenge. The man he sought was Arthur Sheng, my biological father. I used a plan to contact an old servant in the capital, who owed my mother a debt of gratitude, telling her to whisper into Eleanor's ear to stir up the idea of controlling my marriage. I knew Eleanor couldn't stand the thought of me living a good life in Qingzhou. Sure enough, in less than 3 months, my father sent people to bring me to the capital. In the Golden Hall, Dominic angrily threw a stack of letters directly at Arthur's face. They were secret correspondences from over the years between him and my uncle. They detailed corruption, the manipulation of laws, and cold-blooded murders, including the case of the Gu family. Arthur had kept these letters as leverage, fearing his own brother might turn on him. He just didn't expect that I, the one who lived in the shadows of the house, would be the one to silently collect every piece of evidence. In the old Sheng house, no one had ever paid attention to me, which made my actions all the more successful. If Julian had trusted me, if he had been honest with me, this evidence would have been in his hands long ago. He wouldn't have had to play a daily game of cat and mouse with his father's killer, acting humble before Arthur and even using himself as bait. 10 years of companionship, yet he still didn't trust me. I understood why. Because I was a Sheng, he would never trust me. Even if I had told him everything, even if I had handed the evidence to him, he would have suspected that my father and I were setting a trap. He would never understand that some people would do anything for revenge for their father, while others would live in constant fear, just to bring their own father to justice. I had no other way. Fortunately, Dominic believed me. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Arthur had been a tyrant in the court for too long. His enemies were countless. Now that they had the chance, petitions for his impeachment fell like snow on Dominic's desk, leaving the man with no room for denial. Before Arthur was to be executed, I went to the dungeon to see him. Seeing it was me, he cursed in a rage. "You rebellious wretch. I regret not strangling you years ago. Don't be so smug. Do you think the daughter of a criminal will have a good life in the harem? I will be waiting in the underworld to see how miserably you die in that palace." I didn't take the ravings of a madman to heart. I simply brushed a snowflake from my shoulder and looked at him, saying indifferently, "You are the most foolish man in this world. You betrayed my mother's true love, and you spent your whole life raising another man's child." He froze, then burst into a loud, raspy laugh. "You pathetic thing. You never had a father's love, so you're jealous of your sister until you've gone mad. In my heart, you aren't worth even one of Vivian's fingers." I looked at his delusional expression and felt like laughing. I decided to grant him one last favor. "In a moment I will send Eleanor Shen in. Be sure to ask her clearly, is Vivian my younger sister, or the elder sister born exactly 1 month before me? You spent your life plotting and deceiving, yet in the end, you were the one deceived by the woman sharing your bed for a lifetime. Heaven's will is a cycle, what goes around comes around. Tomorrow, when you go down there, my mother will take very good care of you. There are some debts I don't need to kill for, I only need to say the right words to make him die inside once more." He cursed and laughed, mocking me with toxic wishes for my success. I ignored the sounds of his breakdown and walked out. The suffocating weight I had carried for years slowly dissolved, like a door that had been locked for too long finally swinging open. Outside the imperial courtyard, Julian stood in the open air without an umbrella, letting the wind and snow cover his shoulders and turn his hair white. Seeing me come out, a smile touched his lips, both tragic and desolate. We stood under the eaves, looking at each other from a distance. We no longer had any ground to walk side by side. The palace palanquin arrived. I bowed my head and stepped inside. As I passed him, I lifted a corner of the curtain and said softly, "From now on, Sarah owes you nothing." Having paid my debt, I could finally move forward without the past pulling me back. When I returned to my palace, Dominic was unusually free. He dismissed the maids and personally untied my cloak, placing a hand warmer into my palms. His voice was low and gentle. Has the knot in Sarah's heart finally come undone? A strange thought suddenly rose in my mind. I looked up, reached out, and touched his face, slowly stroking from his brow to his eyes, over the bridge of his nose, and stopping at the corner of his mouth. He was momentarily stunned, surprised because I was rarely so forward. I whispered, like snapping an old thread, "Your Majesty, please do not call me Sarah anymore. Let that name remain in the past." His eyes softened instantly, so warm it almost made me forget I was in the depths of the imperial palace. "I don't mind," he said. "You will always be my Sarah. My blessed one, my light." That afternoon, he didn't go to handle state affairs, he stayed in the palace with me, telling me things he had never shared before. He said that 2 years ago, he had already discovered I was a woman. He admired my courage and was truly grateful for the hand I reached out to save him, allowing him to see the late emperor one last time. After ascending the throne, amid the chaos of state affairs, he had sent people to Qingzhou to find me, but the news was always a dead end. During the last hunt, with just one glance, he was so happy he could barely hide it. When I returned triumphantly and smiled at him with my prey, his heart pounded, like a still lake that had been dormant for too long, suddenly rippled by a stone. And when I proposed to enter the palace, even though he knew I didn't love him, he couldn't help but feel a rush of joy. He spoke for a long time. I believed that in this moment he was sincere. In my 17 years of life, few had been so genuine with me, and even fewer had expressed their affection so bluntly. Now that the die was cast, I was willing to let myself sink into this warmth for a short while. As for the future, the love of an emperor, I have never fantasized that it would belong only to me. I can accept the warmth, but I will not allow myself to be blinded. In this palace, the thing that keeps you alive isn't passion, but clarity. As long as I remain clear-headed, and as long as the nation is prosperous and at peace, then the rest of my life in this palace can be considered a good one. After 17 years of schemes, fires, and the destruction of a home, I have finally found a peaceful harbor. The story concludes right where it should, not because the pain has vanished, but because there is enough clarity to keep living. The door to the past is closed. I lean into his embrace, listening to the pleasant crackle of the red charcoal in the brazier. Outside, the snow has stopped. Spring is coming. Seraphina's story teaches us that when the world denies you a path, you must possess the courage to carve your own. Betrayal need not be your destruction. It can be the forge where your true strength is tempered. She demonstrates that dignity is not a gift to be waited for, but a territory to be conquered. True peace comes not from a perfect fairy tale, but from the absolute clarity of knowing your own worth. In a life filled with calculated schemes, the greatest victory is not just surviving the storm, but learning to rule it with a cool head and an unshakable heart. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share Raccoon Tale to help more stories come to life. See you in the next tale.